good to go. All right, cool. Yo, everyone, welcome back to a brand new episode of Techish. It is just me this week, no Abba, Michael Behane, but I have got a very special guest, which I'm going to introduce in a second, but I want to give the context before we dive in. So unless you've been living under a rock, you've probably heard of the writer's strike, but you probably don't know too much about it. I'm just going to give the background and context before I introduce our current guest. So the Writers Guild of America has basically ended their 5-month strike, which began in the 2nd of May. And the strike basically involved pay disputes and AI use in the industry. The Screen Actors Guild has joined the strike on July 13th. And the actors currently remain on strike. And WGA's 11,500 members are to vote on the 3-year deal offering pay rises and AI protections. The strike has halted major shows, some set to return with the strike's end. And the resolution may guide actors into their ongoing negotiations with the studio. Okay, preamble done. That's the context. I want to bring on my guest who is in the field. Me and Abba are not writers. We try to write, but we're not good. We write a little blog posts on Medium and that, but that's not the same thing. Tweets. We've got a proper writer here. So why don't you say hello? Just quickly say your name and like who you are and like what's your whole aura about.
So thanks for inviting me. My name's Tianna Johnson. I'm a screenwriter. I'm from Northwest London. I like to focus on, like fantasy, sci-fi, mostly thriller, horror, that sort of stuff. But you end up doing drama and comedy. I also, up until very recently, was running an organisation called Black Girls Camping Trip. It was a social enterprise. It was for Black women, Black non-binary people. We used to run these curated retreats in the outdoors across 3 days. It was amazing, but ultimately I wanted to dedicate, the rest of my time to writing and to really developing myself as a writer, as a director, producer, and just building up my creative work.
So on the show, we don't let people be humble in it. We let them think their thing. And I was a bit too humble. So from my research, you recently had a show or a script that you had written, greenlit into production. It was called OBR. And it had a Netflix dude get involved and he's doing the production for it. So like the reason why we bring you on the show is because you're about it. You know what I'm saying? You're doing good work. And so what's that process like? How does it go from script, idea in your head, on the paper, and then all of a sudden, dude from Netflix is like, we want to make this happen. Now, where's it going right now, obviously? So
it's actually quite a lot of process, and it's actually not greenlit. It feels like, once you get greenlit at one stage and you have to go through another stage, you have to go through another stage. I think that even like Viola Davis said at one point, she's obviously an actor, but she said that she had to stop doing television shows and start doing films because she filmed so many pilots that, they'd gone through the script stage, they'd gone to the filming the pilot stage, and they just didn't get greenlit for the rest of the series. So it's constantly a process. And, what I did manage to do was to get a development contract. So it basically starts off with you writing your script. I know that sounds so basic, but it's
take us back to the beginning. Yeah, go on. You write your script, you got the idea.
You write the script, you got the idea, you've written the script. It changes like whether you have representation or not. Some people, they start off their career, they've got representation. Other people, they don't. I wouldn't say that there's any perfect route, whatever works for you. From there, you start pitching it to production companies, start talking to producers. A lot of film and television is about relationships, networking. I want to say that, like you sit an exam and you get a qualification and then you're qualified so you can move into this space, but it's really not that. A lot of it is to do with, do I like you? Do I want to work with you? Our projects take years sometimes. And so, it makes sense that vibes plays a big role in who you choose to work with and how you end up working, because really, it's like, do I want to spend the next 5 years working with this person? Bringing a project as well all the way to television when everybody is seeing it is incredibly difficult work and you need a lot of resilience. So, is this person the kind of person that I even want to be with through tough times? Who's going to carry me through the toughest times? But yeah, you talk to producers, you develop those relationships, and eventually those conversations should lead to you being able to work on a project. Now, for some people, pitching a project is, it's going into a room. I've got my full understanding. I've got my script. I've got all my episodes. I know who I want in this show. I know what the vibe is. I know what directors I might want, etc. It can be a whole thing. I've got this team, and it's a whole package is what we would call it. I don't know if you've seen like the show like Industry, or if you know anything about investment banking.
I do, yeah. That's a great show, yeah.
All right, calm. So in investment banking, like they option like these packages, these ideas. And when I watched Industry, it was so bizarre. I was like, oh my God, this is what we do in television. Yeah. So you put together an idea like, okay, I'm going to get this actor, this director, and this show, and then you sell it as a package. So the production company might option it. They'll option it for a set period of time. in that agreement, they're basically saying like, we don't own this idea, but we have the right to help you sell this idea for a set period of time. So I'm giving them the exclusive right to work on, to develop, and to sell this idea. I mean, I was very, very fortunate. Like, a lot of success in entertainment is timing. It really is. I wish it was a meritocracy, but it's not. You have to be great, and then you have to have great timing too. And I just had the right time. Not to say I didn't work hard for a really long time. I did, but one very random day in 2021, I was really going through it on this day, by the way. One of my friends came to get me because mentally I was just finished. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel lost. A lot of the people I went to university with, like my two best friends, one of them works in finance and one of them is a child psychologist.
Wow. So
they work in like institutions, and my institution is kind of like people. It's not a building. It's not a company. And so this friend came to pick me up, and my agent called me while I was on the car, and she was like, have you heard of this award called the Brit List? And I was like, no, I've never heard of this award. And she's like, okay, I'm going to explain to you what it is. Basically, every year, this organization, they go around to the British producers, production companies, and other media and entertainment bodies, and they ask them what is the best unproduced script that they read this year, a script that they read that they thought was brilliant, but they couldn't invest in, they couldn't work on it. Let's say it's a comedy company and you've written a drama, but they thought it was brilliant. Or they don't have the budget for it. They think it's brilliant, but they do smaller stuff. Then they would nominate people and their specifically their scripts for this award. And at the end of a set period of time, the Brit List will release this list with all these writers' scripts. These were like the best ones that nobody could produce. And then it highlights it to everybody in the industry. Look, people thought this was brilliant, but nobody could produce it. So maybe you can produce it. And it gets a lot of attention. I found out that I was on the Brit List that day. So I was one of those writers for 2021. I was quite young at the time. I think I was like 23.
Okay. Humble flex. I like it.
Right.
Young talent.
It was really overwhelming at first. I felt like I was being brought into a part of an institution. Like awards was not something I even thought about for years from now. And then the Brit List go through a process where they give you like some support, some resources. You get to go to talks, you get to meet other screenwriters, which was really, really good for me because writing is so solitary. And it can be really lonely sometimes. So knowing that other screenwriters were experiencing what I was experiencing was really helpful. I think as well, because I was young, it was particularly helpful because they all had experience. So I knew that what I was experiencing wasn't unique and that it's going to be a long road, but there's people who have really good lives and really make really fulfilling art, with the life that you're able to have if you succeed.
What's the show about? We didn't even get into that. So what was the idea, the concept? Are you allowed to discuss it? Is it
I'm allowed to discuss it a bit.
Okay.
So Obia, the word itself, I was so unsure about using this as the name of the show, by the way, because I did not think anyone was going to want to pick it up. Obia is a word used to describe like a belief system from the Caribbean. It's very similar to like voodoo or hoodoo. It combines like Black and West African spirituality that's come to the Caribbean via the transatlantic slave trade. It tends to be mixed with other forms of spirituality, like voodoo's got Catholicism in it, but specifically Obia is from the island of Jamaica. And I wrote this horror thriller, kind of funny, I think, about
sure it is. Don't be humble, come on.
About this British Jamaican girl from northwest London who was very angsty and angry with her place in life at that time. I was just writing myself.
Yeah, of course so. Yeah. That sounded familiar, but it's sounding real familiar. But they say write what you know, so go on.
But she can talk to the dead, and she's really haunted by this experience of talking to the dead. And the opportunity comes about for her to take revenge on the United Kingdom for the transatlantic slave trade.
Damn. Love it.
I really wanted to write this story because it came to me in one of the lowest moments of my life when I was working so hard. And, I feel like in Britain, there's a lot of like social contracts that are broken. So they tell us if you work hard and you go to university, you're going to get a good job. If you dress a certain way, people will respect you. But I know that's not the truth. It's not the case. And the weight of that was really hitting me once I just left uni. Like I'd gone to a Russell Group university. I'd defied all the odds to get there. My parents don't have like an education. And it was so hard. And then I ended up just working in retail. Like I could have got that job straight out of school and probably would have been further up the ladder if I just left school and done that. So I really wanted to write. Like the more I thought about it, the more I thought like, when my grandparents left Jamaica, is this what they imagined for me? Like, what did they imagine for me? They must have imagined something so much better. And I wanted to write that anger and that pain, like that frustration. It's generational and it's cultural into this piece of work. And apparently it resonated. And it resonated with people that I never thought it was going to resonate with. I just never believed it would. I never believed I was going to be a good writer. I was rejected from film school literally a year before I wrote that script.
Wow. And then how did you shop it around? You had friends that you knew that you could send it to, or you hustled to find production companies?
It was really bizarre, but when I finished the script, I tweeted that I'd finished the script and I wrote. I kind of did like a little bit of a synopsis of that. Someone DM'd me and she said to me, "Oh, I've been following you since you were in university and I'm really interested in reading your writing. Any chance I can read it?" I thought, sure. I'd just been rejected from film school, so I didn't think there was anything brilliant or worth stealing in there. She read it. She came back to me about 2 days later and was like, "I think this is a brilliant piece of work. Are you represented?" And I was like, "No, and I don't think I'm good enough to be represented. I was just rejected from film school."
Yeah.
And she was like, "No, you can get represented." She's like, "I'm going to send this to some of my friends." She did. One of those friends ended up becoming my agent.
Wow.
So, I mean, that was just from tweeting it from someone who was my mutual from I was a teenager. And I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Then my agent, she works for a very good agency called Curtis Brown.
Yeah, that's a big agency.
Yeah,
don't be humble about that. That's a bad boy agency.
I could not believe it when she got back to me and said, "I want to have a conversation with you." I just couldn't believe it.
So let me just circle back though. So basically, actually, how I was aware of you was Twitter as well. I'd seen you like tweet quite a lot, and you had quite a good presence on there. So essentially, your Twitter presence is what kind of enabled you to get your script into the right hands, basically. So
Absolutely.
Don't sleep on putting out.
I would never. And I always encourage people as well. Like, I think that people feel like you have to become a content creator in order to be or have any kind of social media presence, when really the key for my social media was just going on there and being myself. Anyone who goes on there just sees me being myself. My producers, when I go into meetings with like new producers, they always mention that they've seen my Twitter and they're like, "I just like the way you talk about things, about anything. The way I talk about life with my siblings, or what it's like in entertainment, what I'm watching right now, what I'm listening to, that sort of thing." Talking about restaurants, I tweeted for a whole month about garlic and people just loved that. My engagement was so high.
Series, yeah.
So it's just really about being myself. And then the more I was able to be myself, the more the right kind of people who I would have wanted to work with, who my work is going to resonate with, were around.
Yeah. So I think let's jump into the writer strike now, because obviously we've caught up a bit about your backstory, and now I think we've almost got up to the present in terms of a timeline. When you heard about the proposed strike, what were your initial thoughts? Like, I often hear about how on the actor side of things, the residuals ain't really residualing no more. It's terrible money. We need to protect the actors. But from the writer's perspective, obviously you're new to the industry, but what do you think has changed that has resulted in this strike taking place?
I think that, ownership over an idea has become really, really important. Who owns what? Who has... I was reading through some of the major points for the new contract, and one of the things that really stood out for me, different things stood out for different people depending what their concerns were. But for me was that, like, you can use AI as a tool, but you can't credit AI, which is good for me, the writer.
Right.
Because it means if I ask AI, like, if I ask ChatGPT to do some research for me on, I don't know, the Boston Tea Party because of something that I'm writing, then the company, the execs, the production companies, the streamers, they can't, cheat me out of my right to my idea because something else put those words together. It's just research, but yeah. So, like,
part of the contention that the studios had is that they didn't want to establish what the ground rules were for AI, essentially. So the writers were like, what is the future with AI? Are you going to use AI to take credit away from us, essentially, right? And they didn't want to establish what their plans were. So part of that strike was about this, right?
Some of it is like that. Some of it is also, it seemed like from the way that, new companies, like tech companies, were popping up in terms of AI and storytelling, and the relationships that they were developing with these large entertainment companies, like, the role of the screenwriter was to become obsolete, and we were supposed to shift more into becoming script editors. So I don't know if anybody's ever used some basic like AI tools like ChatGPT. It can do the basics,
right?
It creates a framework, but you need to edit whatever it writes. There's no way you could just use whatever it's written. It's not that good yet. And we would become the editors of that AI script. For years, like online, I use like Twitter, obviously, or X. But people like were feeding, you know, AI machines Simpsons episodes and then making them churn them out, seeing if it could write a Simpsons episode. I think that's also really important because Simpsons operates in a space where it's satirical, you know, it's contextual, it's not literal.
Yeah.
And that's something that a human can interpret that AI definitely cannot, based on the scripts that it was reproducing.
100%.
So yeah, it was us adding humanity to a machine that was going to have all the resources that we need as writers.
I often heard people also talk about writers' rooms and how that with the advent of streaming, these platforms, as great as they are, we all watch streaming, but they are putting pressure on the writing rooms to be smaller, quicker turnaround. Does that sound familiar?
That does sound definitely familiar, to be smaller. Now, I'm a British writer, and writers' rooms were never a popular concept here.
Oh,
in fact, the idea that a writers' room exists here is very new. It's like, oh, you're very new, you're very fancy.
Describe what a writers' room is from the beginning, basically.
Honestly, a writers' room is when they just gather us in a room, and depending what the goals are, you know, you tend to have like a lead writer or somebody who's in charge, and you know, we create the story. We sit down and discuss the characters, the themes, how we are going to make you feel. We take experiences from our own lives and we put them in there. We contextualize. Bear in mind, like, we're artists. We see ourselves as artists. We see ourselves as people who are informing other people about what the world looks like. And it requires a lot of work. It's a lot of emotional toil. Like, it's a lot of emotional labor. Every time I've been in a writer's room, I haven't even eaten dinner when I've gone in to my house afterwards. I've literally gone straight to sleep because I've had to just recharge from sharing and listening and sharing, and it's so much work. You know, we sit there, we storyboard, we put out beats, we break down the episodes. It's just an incredible amount of work that requires a true group effort. It's so collaborative and you need it. As far as I'm concerned, we need writers' rooms. There's been so many times I put things on paper and I thought it resonated, or I thought it banged, and people have been like, "No, it doesn't bang."
That's dead.
Or, or someone will be like, "Oh, did you know that statistically?" And I didn't know that. You need people to bounce ideas off.
Collaboration is key
for sure. And I'm not just writing for one person, I'm writing for a group. So having that group setting is really important. But streamers do need quicker turnaround. We are blowing through content. Like, we have gone, I think it's Orange is the New Black, no, it's House of Cards was the first show to ever have all of its episodes uploaded at once and created the phenomenon of binge watching.
Mm-hmm.
And from then, we have been doing that. Anybody that couldn't keep up at, you know, a certain point, we were even rejecting traditional broadcasters because they wanted ads and they couldn't give us all the episodes at once. But it turns out that, you know, maybe that old model is more sustainable.
So you're saying it's a double-edged sword in the sense that you were excited by the concept of streaming, in the sense that it's like, I don't know, what was the benefits in your mind? You just briefly went over it just now.
The benefits of streaming is, so for me, I'm a British writer, I'm not an American writer, which means that if I write something for the BBC, it's not likely to extend too far. But if I get a deal with Netflix, everyone in the world can see it. My chances of having my piece of work seen and blowing is much higher. They have higher budgets sometimes. So like Stranger Things, for example, each episode had the budget of some of them, like a movie. 10 independent films. Mm-hmm. You could make 10 independent films from their budgets. And if you were a first time writer, you know, you have this huge infrastructure behind you that's gonna push you. But I mean, I guess it's like anything in this digital tech age. You're told that you can blow overnight, basically, and I think that was quite glamorous. Definitely to me when I was younger, I was like, I can blow overnight. I can write Squid Game. I can write Money Heist. I can write Money Heist. And honestly, I didn't honestly care about the money at that point. I'm older now. I've got a mortgage.
Wiser. Yeah.
I didn't care about the money, but yeah, I just cared, like, at least then I would be able to catapult off that into getting a really good writing job and to being able to, you know, get more control over my writing. You know, you start off as a writer, you're the creator, then you become an executive producer and a showrunner. And over time, you develop more and more ownership over your art. But
isn't on the streaming platforms there isn't that much ownership? So I heard the story of Michaela Cole with what was that great show she did?
I May Destroy You.
But she pitched it to Netflix. They offered it to her, like a good healthy sum, but that's it.
1.5 mil, I think they offered her. But they offered her a really good amount of money, but there is no ownership. There's no ownership in it, and she would rather have the ownership. And I think that's really important. You have to remember as well, like, just how important ownership extends. We have seen reboot after reboot after reboot after reboot on television, and that's because they can do that. They can keep, if you present one idea and it's good enough, you can keep presenting it and just keep making money off of it every 20 years. So they've done The Little Mermaid for our generation, and then for a younger generation, and they've made millions from it. And that's from one idea.
And they're bringing back Harry Potter, aren't they?
They're bringing back Harry Potter. They're bringing back Twilight. In fact, over the past 5 years, in my opinion, we've proven that intellectual property is really what this industry, you know, it centers. Look at Mickey Mouse. It's supposed to come into public ownership from decades ago, and Disney have lobbied to stop that from happening, so they can continue to be the only people to profit off.
So me and Abadesi were having this debate talking about the success of these movies that are all just IP based, and I was saying, does the audience take some culpability in that sense that we only really want to go to the cinema if it's something that I can, I remember that, it's Avengers 10, like, and no shade, I watch all of that shit, don't get twisted. Is there an element where the studios are just feeding into what people want to a certain extent, or is there a hunger for new and original stories on a grander scale than we realized?
I think one of the ways that you could probably consider, like, try to figure out, like, if I'm trying to figure that out, I would consider that Marvel and the MCU have been doing multiverse stories, and those were really popular. It's one of the most attractive things. You know, we loved to see the universe in 100 different ways and what could happen. It's a really great form of escapism. And then on top of that, like the work of the FX artists and the set builders, they're all just amazing. But then I also think then if you consider the success of films like Everything Everywhere All at Once and the new Spider-Man films with Miles.
Yeah, Into the Spider-Verse.
Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse. I think that, you know, those prove that there is yearning for new content. Marvel have been presenting the multiverse to us for a good decade now, and we still got the same kind of story in the Spider-Verse films and in Everything Everywhere All at Once. But they were more about, like, the individual. And instead of seeing, like, how many different ways can we see the world, these other two films ask how many different versions of you are there.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think that proves that there is a hunger for that new content, because even when they've basically given us the same format, we wanted the new story. We wanted to hear the story in a certain way. We wanted to consider ourselves and think about our place in the world, and not just the MCU and everything that is like a whole structure and a whole thing.
Right. Yeah, what concerned me and what led to that debate was because the CEO of Paramount came out and said that we're no longer doing original animation. He basically said that we're not going to do what Disney did with Elementals, or, for example, and it doesn't necessarily connect with the audiences. So we're going to do Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Part 10, right? So I found that concerning, and I thought, is this the beginning of that being rolled out to other kind of verticals? But we hope not. Oppenheimer, I guess, was a big success, and Barbie, even though it was IP, it still was an original movie IP. So
Barbie,
hopefully that means
it was an original movie, and I feel like, did you see that film?
I did see the film, yeah.
I feel like as well, it was an acknowledgement of an old age, and that we're moving on from an old age, we're moving into a new one. More things can be done.
Right.
With IP, I mean, look at the Velma TV show.
Oh, that was a giant flop, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Why did people respond so negative to that Velma show? I don't understand.
I honestly didn't watch it, but, like, apparently it's like a Euphoria version of Velma.
Oh, wow,
it's like sexual and maybe
sexual
violence,
Velma getting it in.
like that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Velma doing a line of
but to be honest,
drugs.
I'm just glad someone was just doing something different. Honestly, I was just like,
at least they tried.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hear it. So let's just go finish up on the strike thing.
Yeah.
We can cut this out if you don't want to talk about it, but obviously it's been 5 months of no work. How you and your other probably writer friends, like, getting by in a time period where, like, you're literally not allowed to work on your main craft?
So for us in the UK, we are allowed to work in the UK.
Okay. So because you are part of the British Writers Guild.
Yeah. So you join the guild when you start professionally writing, and when you get your first pay from someone who's going to broadcast your work.
Okay.
So we can actually work here, but I would say that for anybody who had a significant income from the US, they had that for a reason, because our salaries in the UK just don't match up to even the old deal in the US. When I got my first deal, like my first production company deal in the US, I was so happy.
US, those dollars.
Embarrassing, yeah. And I think I look back now and I'm like, I'm actually gonna be open about the money. It was 40 grand. And I got a £20,000 signing fee. Obviously, my agent and everybody takes up their fees too. It was £20,000. I was on Universal Credit just before then. So having 20 grand in my account like that overnight was amazing. But now I'm like, there is billions of dollars in Hollywood. Like, what I got was not even a crumb of that money. It was not even a crumb of that. And that's one of the hardest parts about being a writer, especially a writer who's coming from that working class background, because I know that I can be exploited. Like, they can put that kind of money in front of me.
Yeah.
And yeah, people make bad decisions like that all the time. Look at the music industry. People get their first pay and then have to produce 10 albums and that sort of thing.
Those PDD contracts.
Right.
Bad boy reference.
The good thing about everything is that I have an agent, which means that I have an agency as well. So I don't just have a person, I have an infrastructure, I have an institution behind me that's there to comb over my contracts. If my agent herself didn't know something that's in a clause, I know that she has the entire infrastructure to ask and to support her in performing her duties. So I'm very lucky in that regard. But I would say, a significant portion of my income was from the US, and I have only had to rely on my UK income. And
so how do the US people feel about that? Is there like an expectation of like global solidarity, or is it like, you lot are over there, do your thing, we're over here, it's a different fight?
Global solidarity in a sense that we are not allowed to pitch to any US companies. So while I was allowed to work in the UK, I could not have pitched to Netflix or Prime Video or anything like that. I could only pitch to BBC, Channel 4, ITV.
Okay.
Because it's British companies. Yeah. And it was, at the end of the day, I actually do want work on these platforms. They're traditional British platforms. This is where I fell in love with television. Who's going to understand my work more than Black Brits?
Yeah.
So that they do have to be in those spaces too. But also, I want to be able to feed myself.
100%. You got to do what you got to do. I respect it.
It's so hard. Like, mentally, I've really struggled for the past couple of months. I was doing the Black Girls Camping Trip as well. So when I would have started planning that event last year, I didn't know the right strikes were going to be happening. So by the time we were coming up to the event, I was 2 or 3 months into the strikes, and I had no income in that time. So it became really difficult. I'm a founder. I'm a freelance artist, and I'm a young woman in Britain. Like, I'm a young Black woman in Britain. So the odds are already so far stacked against me. But everything about life I'm learning as I get closer to 30 now, because I'm turning 27 next month.
Come on, so you're 26 and you're talking about close to 30. Don't do that to me. You're fine, don't worry.
In life is about resilience, like
100%.
And all I can do is try to develop and maintain that resilience. There's been a lot of times where I did not think I was going to get through it. There's even today, I text my agent, I was like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yes, you can. Come on. But what was I going to say to you? So as well as being a writer, you mentioned it just briefly just now.
Yeah.
Writer, creative, but you're also somebody who's a founder, and you've started a few projects, and also you've got ideas for businesses. So how me and you know each other is that you've taken part in Abadesi's Play School, which is an accelerator that she does for like young entrepreneurs, where she kind of guides you through mindset, different skill sets that you're going to need to launch your business. So I was like a mentor in that program, and that's how we met at dinner recently. So it's very rare that you meet somebody who's trying to juggle so many different things. How do you view kind of entrepreneurship, trying to be a founder? Like, what's that world saying to you? That's like, what drives you to want to do that?
Do you know, I also did my master's full-time during that time, and that was really hard.
Oh, you're a hustler. Wow.
Yeah, that was while I had my tech job too. So there was like, it's one of the things I actually checked my agent about today. I said, early on I sacrificed a lot, because I kept telling myself that you have to work this hard if you want success. Like I said, the odds are so far stacked up against me. And I just felt like it was go hard or go home time. I will never do this again. I don't think that any young person should be working a full-time tech job, doing their master's full-time, running a company and trying to write. That's insane. Looking back, I'm just like, he was mad to do that. And a lot about growing up is realizing that was working too hard is also immature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of is.
But the fact is that I am driven. I know what I want, and I've known what I wanted for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And like, not many people know this about me, but I briefly went to Sylvia Young Theatre School, which is a performing arts school here in the UK.
Yeah.
Amy Winehouse went there. A couple of like people who were like famous in Britain went there. And I really struggled during my time there. I experienced a lot of like racial racism and stuff like that. I was very young. I was only 10. And I was the only working class person in that school. I don't care. Like, there's like 2 other people and they got scholarships as well. And I felt like I was pushed out of the industry when I was like 10 or 11. There was no roles for me. The only thing I was able to prepare for was the Lion King on stage and Lyceum Theatre. And by the time I was old enough to do the audition, I was too tall. And I was too developed. They said, I had breasts for my age and stuff like that. They didn't want that in their young Nala. And that was really hard. I felt pushed out of the industry. But coming back as an adult, I felt like I'm an adult. No one can talk to me crazy anymore. I'm not disempowered. I look back at how like teachers and like ballet teachers or whoever the hell was talking to me. No one can ever talk to me like that now. I can defend myself. And part of that is what drives me too, because I know that there was a younger version of me that deserved to explore her artistic expression, especially because I'd earned my place in that institution and I've earned my place now. So I just want to make sure that I make the best of it. I want to give myself the best chance. I don't want to look back and be like, I should have worked a bit harder on that day. I want to make sure that I don't have no regrets.
That's dope. So I think we're coming to the end, but like I want to wrap it up with, I'll put you on the spot, like tips for aspiring creatives in general. So not necessarily a writer. You can be somebody who's trying to bring something into existence from the ether. What would you say?
Whenever people ask me this, I always start off with resilience. I'm like, I'm so sorry, but you need some form of resilience. Yeah. And when I say that, I don't mean like it has to be all on you. Start developing that support system from now. Who are your friends? I have one friend who I could not have got this far without him supporting me. He always believed in me when I did not believe in myself, when there was no one to tell how bad I wanted it. He always said, I believe you can do it. I believe you. So I'd say that's a big one. The second one is about originality. Don't try to be like anybody else. Unless you really like the stuff that other person is doing and you want to do something like an homage or whatever. But don't try to be like anybody else. Mm-hmm. Create the kind of work that you want to create. I got rejected from film school when I tried to write a piece of work that I thought was industry standard. But when I got rejected and I wrote Obia, I wrote Obia the way I did because I never thought anybody would see it, because I'd already been rejected from film school. And that turned out being like a really impactful piece of work. And I always had it in me. I always knew I was a good writer. I think as well, don't be afraid to shift. I started off thinking I wanted to write one kind of genre, work with one kind of person, and then I was like, actually, I don't think that's right or that's the truth. Mm-hmm. And then my last piece is a bit cynical, so I'm really sorry about it.
No,
but it's just to protect yourself and, be wary of people. There's a lot of money to be made. There's a lot of power and influence to be gained. I think a lot of people think that, because we work in entertainment, we're talking about directors and actors and stuff like that, that we make loads of money and we have very glamorous lives. And actually a lot of writers just have very humble lives. But there's people on the outside who will see that and they want a piece of it and might try to get close because they think you have something that you really don't have.
So be resilient, create that support network, be original, be yourself, basically. And protect your ish. Watch out, there's a few scumbags out there that are going to try and teeth your work. Okay, that's fair enough. I think that's it for this week's Techish. But thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for coming down and being a great guest.
Thank you
very
for
informative.
Me.
And we'll catch everyone next week. Hit us up at Techish Pod. Is there any socials that you want to share, people to find you?
I'm Tianna the writer on everything. So I think that's on TikTok, on Twitter.
Okay, dope.
And Insta.
We'll put that in the show notes and we'll catch you lot next week. Peace. Bye.
Bye.